here. And I think we should be good to go. I just need to play a bumper intro and do my little ditty. And
okay,
here we go. Let's see how this sounds. This is Blacklisted News Radio. It's the 25th day of June, 2013. My name is Doug Owen. I'm the senior editor of blacklistednews.com. You can check out the website dedicated to this show. It's blacklistedradio.com for your convenience, interactive chat room, and all of the amenities. You can also download the podcast, get it on demand 24 hours a day. We're on iTunes, Spreaker Radio, Stitcher, TuneIn, all of the usual suspects. You can find us there. Just look for my name or the name of the show. Tonight we are talking with, well, somebody I'm very familiar with, James Corbett. He's prolific, an independent media journalist, and somebody who has been doing a lot of research, who has had his nose to the grind in all of these scandals regarding Spygate and all of the different manifestations. We'll talk about some of those and your recent interview with Russ Tice. But first, welcome to the show, James. It's good to hear from you.
Well, it's good to be back on. It's been a long time since we talked, but it's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, 2 years plus. I was just kind of lamenting that before we started recording the podcast, and that's the fact that I usually use this show to either just have monologues or to talk to people that I usually would not want to. Like I would actually contact and talk to you on a one-on-one basis, not necessarily in an environment where we're just focused on news or a specific piece of information. I think of you more in a friendly manner. So that's why I don't extend myself out to a lot of the people that I'm a really big fan of. But nonetheless, it's been too long. Welcome back. What have you been learning? You just recently interviewed Russ Tice, a whistleblower that is not getting a lot of media attention, considering some of the things that he has brought to light. I mean, the private spying that is going on, the collusion between the federal government, the Department of Justice, private multinational corporations like Google, Paltalk, Skype, what we're using right now, and just about every popular communication medium. But what he brought forward is something even more sinister, something that we saw come out of the DOJ, the Department of Justice Spygate, and that is that the government is spying on politicians. So tell us
exactly
about
it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The NSA is spying on them at any rate. Well, for people who don't know, Russ Tice is one of the sources that was used for the 2005 original story in the New York Times that broke the entire NSA warrantless wiretapping story. So He was one of the sources that James Risen and Eric Lichtblau used, and basically ever since that time in 2005. He's been attempting to go a little further and to try to get people's attention to what's been going on behind the scenes. He's popped up time and again over the past several years. Back in 2009, in fact, he was on Keith Olbermann. After Obama took office, he decided to go further because of some of the information that he had that he felt wasn't security in nature, it was political in nature. So he decided once the administration changed, he would go a little bit further, and he had revealed that, in fact, the NSA had been specifically spying on the communications of journalists. And he was kind of surprised when the entire journalistic class collectively shrugged their shoulders over that revelation, which makes it all the more bizarre because 4 years later we get to the AP spying story, which suddenly becomes a big scandal as if it was something new, when in fact he was talking about this literally 4 years ago. And people can watch that even on YouTube. It's he was on MSNBC's Countdown with Keith Olbermann back in the day. So he's been blowing the whistle for years and years about what's been going on in the NSA. But given what the Snowden situation and what's developing now and all of this melodrama that's happening around the manhunt for Snowden, he thought, well, this is the time to step forward and to go even further. And he decided to reveal on BoilingFrogsPost.com originally, and then in a follow-up interview the next day on CorbettReport.com, that, in fact, yes, the NSA has been wiretapping numerous political figures and even military officials and people in the judiciary. All three branches of government, all sorts of people from congressional, Republican and Democratic leaders to people on, for example, like the entirety of the Supreme Court. He personally held the wiretap order for Judge Alito in his hand, but he says the entire Supreme Court was wiretapped. People like General David Petraeus and General Shinseki, other four-star generals. People like White House Press Secretary Scott McClellan, Secretary of State Colin Powell, and a little-known Illinois senator who went on to become president, Barack Obama, were all being wiretapped by the NSA. Russ Tice held these orders in his hand, actually saw them. So this is pretty bombshell information for people who understand what this really indicates, because, of course, what is the NSA doing specifically targeting, I mean, there were actual wiretap orders for these people, specifically targeting high-ranking political figures for wiretapping. This is the type of really disturbing information that points to a thoroughgoing, basically undermining of anything that was resembling what was left of a democracy or a republic, in that this information is obviously incredibly useful in the hands of blackmailers. And this is, I think, ultimately what can explain so much of what's been happening behind the scenes politically for decades now, is that there's been the creation of this national security state that basically spies on everything that the government is doing and uses that as leverage over each individual politician. We've seen lots of individual cases of this over the decades, but I think what Russ Tice has just blown the lid on is an incredibly wide program that absolutely no one in the mainstream media in the United States has even picked up on, let alone is talking about.
Well, maybe they have national security letters and they're just not allowed to talk about it. We found out from Rand Paul only after Ed Snowden leaked, and as part of that whole narrative, that he, along with many others in the Senate and other representatives, were well aware of what was happening, could not tell the American people under threat of arrest, and only after this leak were willing to even go on the record. Many of them just went on vacation, did not participate in a lot of the oversight committees and looking into this whole debacle with the private security contractor Booz Allen Hamilton and their contractor Ed Snowden. But I think it brings up a really big point that many people are missing, and that is that if our elected leaders, all the way up to the President of the United States, are being wiretapped, then who is really in control of the government? And I think you hinted at that, and that is the intelligence agencies behind the facade of the politics and the day-to-day political theater that we're given.
That's exactly right. In fact, I just had an hour-long conversation with Sibel Edmonds about this exact point, and we just got into some great degree of detail about not only what she knew firsthand working in the FBI about the ways that various politicians were being communications were being spied on in the name of various cases that the FBI was working on. Some of these high-ranking political figures just kind of got caught up in that dragnet. But, of course, the information was being stored anyway. And, of course, this goes back and raises the ghosts of the FBI itself. And, of course, J. Edgar Hoover, who famously had his personal filing cabinet full of the documents, the dirt on every politician in Washington, which is what secured his position at the FBI for decades and decades and decades and decades.
And he wanted to blackmail people because, of course, he was a cross-dresser, so he understood, how to use and manipulate the little secrets that people have for political gain and power.
Exactly right. Yeah. No. If there's dirt on you, you better make sure you get dirt on everyone else so that you can hold it over them. And that's exactly what that process was about. And that's exactly what it continues to unfold from not only the revelations of Sibel talking about her experience with the FBI, but of course now with Russ Tice and the NSA. And you're exactly right. This does raise the question of who is ultimately pulling the strings, who is behind the scenes doing this. And clearly the person on the other side of that wiretap is the one that holds the leverage in that relationship. The person who's who's listening in on the communications has those recordings and knows what's being said by all of these high-ranking political figures and judges. Clearly, it's the national security state, the intelligence agencies that hold that power, and you can see this in the rise of someone like a General Keith Alexander, who not only became a 4-star general, but then of course became not only the head of Cybercom, but the head of the NSA, and now holds enormous amounts of power in Washington, and perhaps even more so now that we have this revelation about what's going on behind the scenes.
And it brings up the bigger point, and that is the power of big data. And just weeks before this was all brought to light, Booz Allen Hamilton, just one of many private body shop contractors that have become multi-billion-dollar international syndicates thanks to 9/11 and the war on terror. They hold a huge amount of power. And so this is what I would categorize as fascism, and that is where you have the security state and so much of it is privatized that the people in the country have no recourse, and neither do the politicians, because quite frankly they are all compromised and being blackmailed. So the higher implications I think most of the people are missing, because we are playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, but without Carmen Sandiego, with Ed Snowden, and now this brings us back to the G8. Vladimir Putin was, as some in the media, in the U.S. media, have called him divisive and abrasive, because he did not want to full-fledged give Syria to the Western imperialists, for lack of a better term, the people that are going to profiteer and have created the new government and all of our new friends in the Free Syrian Army. But Vladimir Putin immediately, following the G8, signed a $270 billion deal with China, and just signed a big contract with Azerbaijan, $1 billion military contract. Now he has Ed Snowden, allegedly. So what do you think all of this means? I mean, I think this really does tie a lot of the story that's happening now right back to what's happening on the ground in Syria, in Jordan, in Turkey right now. So what's your take on that?
Well, you're right. I mean, there is this geopolitical thing that's happening at the exact same time as the Snowden drama is unfolding. And, of course, the Snowden thing is going to complicate everything that's going on with Russia, with China, potentially with other countries as well. Of course, the insinuation is that he's heading for Ecuador, and Ecuador has a trade deal that's expiring soon that will be up for renegotiation with the United States. So that might enter the politics. When we come to Russia specifically, of course, Putin has been that staunch opponent to a lot of the U.S. imperialistic drive, specifically in Syria, obviously because of the Russian naval assets and other ties with Syria, and I think that is only going to be exacerbated by these recent revelations. Of course, just a week or two ago, one of the extra revelations from Snowden's data is that, yes, the GCHQ was spying on everyone at the G20 a couple of years ago in the UK, and even setting up dummy internet cafes so that delegates would be using these completely bugged equipment, etc.
That's the internet in the box. Remember that? The internet in the box that they would take to all the countries where they knocked down the Twitter during the Jasmine Revolution. Yeah, they did. They took it to the G20 and tested it on the politicians. And just a few months back, Google was red-handed caught in the UK spying on politicians. So you have the NSA working with Google out there spying on China, working intimately with China, as well as most of our Western partners, and getting the goods not only on our own politicians, but on our allies and I'm sure adversaries as much as they can. I mean, hence Stuxnet. It's not just about gathering information. It's also about creating holes and tunnels to put all sorts of nice malware into other foes and opponents' computer systems. So there's a lot more of that cloak and dagger aspect to all of this, other than just grabbing your metadata and figuring out your text messages via Skype. But what's your take on this Ed Snowden story? I think that it's brought a lot of people to look at the security state, which I'm glad of, bringing more awareness to this. I was stunned, and I think it was 2008 when Mark Klein showed us the CIA rooms at AT&T where they were tapping into all of the communications hubs coming into this country, and watching this on Keith Olbermann. And now seeing this and saying, well, I think that a lot of this seems to be somewhat theatrical and conveniently timed nonetheless.
Well, you are right about that. In fact, that was one of the other things that I talked about with Russ Tice, is that there's been a lot of conversation around metadata and this type of thing. And, we're only looking at metadata. It's not actual content of calls, etc. But right. According to Tice, according to, of course, what we knew already from Klein, it is, in fact, every single communication, everything that's coming in, wholesale metadata and content, is being scooped up by the NSA directly in their little backroom, for example, 641A in the San Francisco facility of AT&T, as Mark Klein blew the whistle on. Also, Russ Tice was working in space communications, so he was coming at it from the satellite angle, and he said not only terrestrially, but also, of course, satellite, everything was being recorded, or is being recorded at this point anyway. He said in the past there hasn't been the actual computing power to and the actual physical power to be able to do that. But now that they have the NSA facility in Utah, etc., coming online, they've basically got that storage capability now. So absolutely every single communication is being stored now. In fact, this was something that was also broken just a few weeks before the Snowden scandal began. ex-FBI official Tim Clemente was on CNN talking about the Boston bombing case, and happened to sort of slip that, we could get Djokar's fiance's phone calls. We could get that information, and the person who was interviewing him was a bit flabbergasted by that. She thought, well, not if there wasn't a voicemail that was left, surely. Right. And he said, no, we can go back if it's a national security case. We can go back and listen to what was said in that conversation. And he had to come out and admit, they've got recordings of everything. They don't want to admit it for legal purposes, but they have it. So that was already being admitted, and the AP spying story, of course, was also breaking. So now you have Snowden arriving on the scene, and the conversation shifts to PRISM and some of these other topics. It does raise the question of limited hangout. It does raise the question of suspicious
Webster
timing.
Tarpley saying that. A lot of people have already said that this guy's a hero, and I think you watch out. Where you fall on that grenade at the moment, because this could be a larger psyop, because I saw a genuine scandal brewing that went right directly to the Department of Justice and to the White House beyond PRISM, which is something that we were all well aware of. And that was the spying in the cloakrooms. So the Department of Justice was tapping and bugging the cloakrooms. And this is, the most intimate of places where business is conducted. Not that I'm a big fan of, but in secret. I like more transparency and shining light on the Congress critters. But nonetheless, this is where you have this false sense of security, and so this all directly tied to the White House, whereas now you have this international situation, because this is putting more pressure on Russian, or seemingly Russian, and U.S. and Chinese relations. So the implications seem much larger for going after the Department of Justice rather than this private contractor that, under Section 215 and the secret interpretations of the Patriot Act, we don't even know what may or may not be legal. So trying to, look at this from a legal standpoint is kind of a morally bankrupt or legally bankrupt way to approach it, because the law has been so perverted.
Exactly right. Well, let's put it this way. I don't know if Snowden is real, or if he's fake, or if he's real, but he's been fed fake documents, or what the case may be. There's a lot of layers of speculation going on there. But regardless of whatever that is, this entire situation does play into the hands of the U.S. government in a couple of ways. First of all, the drama surrounding Snowden and his movements, and where is he going next, and will he be expelled from Russia, and blah, blah, blah. This endless attention that's being placed on Snowden himself as a person is, of course, distracting from the issues raised by the NSA spying scandal generally. And secondly, I think it does play an important role in showing to any would-be whistleblowers within the establishment. I mean, if there was any mistake about it, this is exactly what's going to happen to you. You're going to be hunted down in this big spectacle, and it's going to be, this big manhunt for you. So I think that this is in whatever Snowden is. I think this is playing into that agenda. And I think you're right. Again, it's distracting from the main issues of the spying itself and what was actually going on. And I think that this, I mean, there's the negative side and the positive side. I think that this is a story that's in motion. It's definitely got people talking about the NSA, and NSA has been trending on Twitter every day now, and things like this that we would never have seen before. So to that extent, it's a good thing. And we have that moment, this precise moment of opportunity to try to drive through the narrative of, in fact, they're listening to everything. In fact, they're wiretapping politicians, and, to use this as political blackmail. We can get that message through by using the momentums that's surrounding this story. We just have to be wise about it, and we have to try to use this the momentum around the story itself to try to get the real information through.
Well, you hit it on the head, and that is that people want a cult of personality, somebody to believe in. And one of the things that I do really respect Ed Snowden for saying, and that is that initially that he knew what the repercussions of this were, and I thought that was pretty moving in and of itself. Look, I may be tortured, I may find the same my same fate in a kangaroo courtroom, like Bradley Manning. These things I have already considered, and before you do something like this, and there's 5 million people plus that have security clearances, top secret security clearances and above. So there's plenty of people that know exactly what's happening inside of the shadow government, if you will, inside of these agencies that probably have very damning and very dangerous information. So, Glenn Greenwald and The Guardian picking this story up and being really the legal mediators along with WikiLeaks, which is something that kind of shook me because I didn't realize that WikiLeaks itself had representatives with the EFF, and they had different dignitaries, and they were escorting and in contact with Ed Snowden. And, it's so, I guess it's kind of enigmatic. I don't know what it is, and I don't think that just wasting your time in Arrested Development, searching for the bad guy and all of this. I think that the most productive thing that you can do with these kind of opportunities is, like you said, to talk about these issues, to use this as a way to actually have a broader discussion about groups and institutions and agencies that most people would not otherwise talk about. But you mentioned a chilling effect. The AP phone scandal definitely brought a lot of awareness to the fact that these people could be charged with espionage. They could be charged under who knows what kind of laws, or via the Patriot Act, or some of the latest amalgamations of that. But that you have now this murder, this very strange murder with Michael Hastings. Are you familiar with this? The Rolling Stone journalist?
Yes, absolutely. The assassination.
He found himself in a fireball, and his engine was ejected backwards. It looked to me at least to be 100 yards or so, but he had just recently contacted WikiLeaks as well, and was planning allegedly to blow a big story with the NSA and the CIA wide open. It had reached out to WikiLeaks. He was in a brand new Mercedes-Benz, very nice one, and he saw a very untimely fate. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, that in and of itself, and just I think, in-your-face problems with the story would have quite a chilling effect, almost so sloppy that it seems like a message to reporters.
I think that's how a lot of these operations work. They have to be done in a way that basically show to anyone who's thinking about doing something similar exactly what's going to happen to them. So we can look at all sorts of examples in the past of people who have killed themselves in spectacularly ridiculous ways. From Cop of the Year Terry Yakey in Oklahoma City slashing himself like a stuck pig, I believe was the way it was described, with the blood just everywhere inside his car, and he dragged himself across the field for a mile and then shot himself in the back of the head, supposedly. Or, of course, Gary Webb shooting himself in the head twice, or Danny Casolaro cutting himself up in the bathtub, despite the fact that he was squeamish about even the sight of blood, etc., and his manuscript going missing in the hotel room, and all of these other ridiculous situations where we're expected to believe it was suicide. I think that this one is, again, another case where it's just so spectacularly, I don't know, botched is quite the right word, because perhaps they intended to make it so sloppy. But you're exactly right. I mean, I think that anyone who looks at that scene and the engine block being flown 100 yards away and the fiery wreckage that took them 2 days just to identify the body, that's definitely not usual for a car crash, we'll say. And again, for anyone out there who's wondering, well, what do we have to go on here? Well, how about taking the word of Richard Clarke, ex National Security Advisor, the we failed you on 9/11, Richard Clarke.
Yes.
Who has been quoted as saying that he believes that this is something that's consistent with a car cyber attack, which is, I'm sure, a phrase that has never entered the lexicon of the news before. But yes, a car cyber attack. Now that we are in this realm of big data and big, basically IT, where everything is controlled by microchips and processors, well, guess what? They can be hacked into just like your PC on your desktop can. And they can do things like shutting off the brakes or turning on the acceleration or stopping the power steering or whatever the case may be from remotely. In fact, this has been demonstrated before by researchers that car systems can be hacked into remotely. Mm-hmm. So this is now something we have to take into account. But as Clarke himself,
if you think it's wild, go to autosec.org and I think it's the Michigan college there. I'm trying to think. I don't remember the name of it, but they have a huge paper about this because this was a real issue because they thought about politicians and others that would be traveling dignitaries and the potential for somebody to hack those vehicles and use that as a way to attack a politician in their SUV as they go by. So these things have been thought about and have been looked at, and they do have the technology to do this.
They absolutely do, and unfortunately, as Richard Clarke notes, there's no way to prove it. So this is the really insidious thing. In the past, we've had false flag events that are blatantly false flag events that we can go back and look at the various evidence for, like something like 9/11. But when we enter the age of cyber false flag terrorism, where there are these events that happen and who knows, somebody somewhere somehow hacked in and manipulated some code, even if you can prove that that's what happened, finding the person who hacked in and manipulated the code is an entirely different level of research that can't be done by the average person on the outside. So this is really opening up the possibility of a pretty nightmarish future where who knows what could happen? A subway could go haywire. A nuclear power plant systems could go down, or whatever it is, and that can be blamed by the government on basically anyone they want. Oh, it was definitely Chinese hackers. It was definitely it was Syrian hackers. Now we have to go into Syria. Whatever the case may be, however ridiculous it may be, they might float that, and we've already seen them starting to do this. It was last year they came up with this ridiculous story about how Iran was hacking into American banks, which they kind of dropped that story after they floated it as kind of a trial balloon. But it just goes to show that I think the types of stories we're going to start hearing more and more of now that we've entered this age of cyber false flag terrorism. Well,
there's still plenty of physical false flag terrorism. Speaking of which, one that nobody in the alt media caught, and I'm sure you did, but Obama had planned to basically pin the chemical weapons on the Syrian government. Talked about this plan. It was rolled out in Yahoo News, the Daily Mail, LA Times picked up on it, and talk about Cheney-esque. People say, well, now he because of this Spygate, he is harnessing and channeling Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney talked about painting up Navy SEAL PT boats and pretending to have or making them look like Iranian attack boats and having those shoot at a naval destroyer in order to engage Iran. So these are the same kind of ideas and talking points that are just, I mean, out in the open. You can read them in the newspaper, and because of all of the other fanfare, all of the other melodrama that's happening, not too many people have noticed this ongoing war in Syria. And we have Eager Lion, I think, is the new mission, and they have just a ton of troops. I think 1,800 plus, 4,000 altogether that are training right there in Jordan. So, everything kind of is pivoting towards Russia and what they do in this position. And they're saying that they are going to continue to supply missile systems and maybe even possibly to Iran as well in the very near future, to the Syrian people as well, or to Bashar al-Assad. So this is kind of the stalemate. And that's what I've been watching. And I know that this whole Spygate brings up the better question, or the bigger question, that is, who are the people that are running the government? Who has the power? And I think it does show the privatization of all of that. I mean, Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex, and it is here and it's alive. And I think that this is at least showing people how much power private corporations have, how much more information they have. And in a day and age where we live, where almost everything that we have is in the digital form, it should be the most paramount for us to worry about our privacy. I mean, even more so than people reading your physical mail. I mean, what do you get in your physical mail? Probably not much, other than bills. And if somebody wants to pay my bills, feel free. You can hack right into it. But other than that, not too much gets physically pushed. And so we now have the lightening of a lot of these very, very strict eavesdropping laws that surrounded the U.S. postal system. I mean, even a grander conspiracy, they're trying to get rid of the U.S. postal system and completely privatize it, so there's no accountability or culpability for when your mail is lost. Not that there's much now, but it's this broader, I think, agenda to push more and more of the most important decisions that are being made in government into private hands that are unaccountable to the people.
Well, I as an anarchist, I'm going to have to go 180 degrees on you on that one. I certainly would welcome the privatization of services like that, so that we can actually get accountability by voting with our dollars, rather than having unaccountable governments that don't listen to the people.
Don't we do that now, though, when we have private competition against the government? Not that government isn't subsidized, but I mean, we at least have the option to go with other private means. And I do
more or less. But actually, the Postal Service is a perfect example of that, because look back in history at Lysander Spooner setting up his own rival postal service that the government legislated out of existence because it was doing too well, and in fact doing not only better than the Postal Service in terms of delivery, but in fact doing it cheaper than the Postal Service was doing. So they had to put an end to that. My God, competition? Absolutely not. So, right. But anyway, but
philosophically, I'm an anarcho-capitalist at heart, but I just think that in this day and age, in an age of industrial robber baronism, that what we see chalked up to be the free market, or the things that people show to us to be free market, the reason that it's so manipulative is because the protections, the few that we have, that they're able to manipulate. But not that if we had a completely free system, but we do have selective regulation, and that's a big problem. As long as we have that, then we're not going to see a free market system in its purest form. But so philosophically, I agree. I just think that when you hear people like the Koch brothers talking about free markets and going after going after those commies, they profit a lot, and they're not necessarily working in the best interest for the people at those companies that they subdivide. So there's a big difference between raw naked capitalism, or as opposed to something that would have more protections for people, especially in this country. Not that we in the United States need all that many. I mean, when you look at China and other, I wouldn't call them. They're fascist systems, but that's the problem I think that we have. We have robber baronism.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. We are in a fascistic system where the corporatocracy is absolutely what is melded in with the government, so it's absolutely indistinguishable.
Right.
And back to your larger point about big data, and I think that this is something that is, in fact, so big, so important, so pervasive that in many ways most of the public can't even understand the changes that are taking place around them right now. And I think that's part of the reason why we haven't had the bigger societal conversation that we need about this and about Google and Facebook and these companies that have unbelievable amounts of data on all of their users. And even if we were to say that the NSA wasn't spying on all those communications, I mean, even the idea of putting that much data and power in the hands of a few corporations, it should be worrying to people generally. But not a lot of people do seem concerned about that. And that's because, of course, it's taking place in this nebulous cyber universe that people don't really understand on a physical level. They don't see it. They don't taste it. They don't touch it. So in many ways, it just doesn't exist to them. And it's not until people start being affected by it personally, perhaps people who have suffered from identity theft or something like that will understand the types of problems. But until it affects people personally, again, it's one of those things that people can't even comprehend. Although, interestingly enough, of course, what did we just see at the recent Bilderberg 2013? One of the meeting agenda topics, even from the official agenda list, how big data is changing almost everything. And of course, you've got people like Eric Schmidt and others, Bill Gates and others attending these Bilderberg conferences now on a regular basis. So I think that the establishment definitely knows what's going on and is definitely doing this as part of a concerted attempt to snare people in this, to construct the architecture, the infrastructure of this cyber universe so that people are basically trapped in it from the beginning. If they can get the internet down to a few websites that everyone goes to, a YouTube, Facebook, Google, PayPal, if they can take all of that potential that exists there with the internet and people coming together for the first time in human history to spontaneously and freely interact in this global marketplace, if they can capture that from the beginning, then they've won. And to a large extent, I think they've almost been successful with that already. And we still do have freedoms online and the ability to choose where we're putting our time and energy and our data. So I hope people do understand just how important this is and how much every single decision they make every day, whether to use Google to search or something like startpage.com or whatever it may be, is a decision that they are making to whether to be involved in this, ensnared in this matrix, or to try to go around it. And if people don't understand just how important that decision is, then in many ways we've lost before we've even started.
Oh, sure. I mean, most of these companies, you have to understand, they are legally bound to give this information to the government. A lot of them have chosen or elected to allow them into their servers just to cut costs. But at the end of the day, it's really about accumulating and selling your soul, your digital soul, to the highest bidder, whether it be an insurance corporation or someone selling you a product or an idea or maybe a political message. I think one of the great things is that I see Google ads and many of their translations and a lot of what they do is completely erroneous. So if that is any or ineffectual, so if that's any hope for the future, I think that we still, as human beings, are much smarter than Google. And so we have that going for us. And people's opinions and I think their awareness has changed about digital technology and where we're going. Because so much of this is new. So much of this is, people that are kind of naive, like my mom, who she just wants to see pictures of her grandchildren. And she's, coming to the internet now. Never before have so many people been on the internet. At no point have we had so much information being collated and put into the internet on a daily basis. So I think that if they are putting all of their eggs in the big data basket, that they will be sorely challenged by those pieces of information they get, because so much of this is garbage in, garbage out. I hearken back to the air marshals. The air marshals have quotas. They have to find fictional terrorists, and if you have databases filled with fictional terrorists, well, we all live in a ridiculous world where everybody's getting felt up by the TSA, and we're all groped on a daily basis because everybody's a terrorist. But it's absolutely ineffectual at finding terrorists. At some point, the machine itself becomes so riddled with bad intel, and that's what the government's been doing for the most part. And I see it all the time with Google, so that gives me a lot of hope. And I think also people's perception, because of stories like these, because of things like identity theft, people are going to become more aware of it. But I think that there's the real chance that they're going to look back to government or the same companies and institutions for that security. The Stockholm syndrome aspect of being ripped off.
Well, this is the insidious part of it, because people can't even imagine, actually going around the infrastructure of Google and Apple and these other big name companies. What they ultimately want is to be able to use all of the gadgets that they have and to continue using them. But can we just get the NSA out, and can we just make these companies promise and swear and cross their heart and hope to die that they won't do anything bad with the information? And I think a lot of people would be placated with those types of trite solutions, quote unquote, to these fundamental infrastructural problems. And I think that the only real solution that lies on the table that people, I think, are afraid to even think about, because it's just so much work, so much hassle. But I think it comes in setting up the alternative infrastructure and going with hardware that doesn't have these backdoors built into it, software and operating systems that don't have NSA backdoors, and ultimately getting rid of the fondle slabs and the other devices that people have in their pockets that they can't get rid of, and replacing them with something different. I mean, you have to look at someone like Richard Stallman and have some degree of almost reverence for someone who can avoid all of these technologies. I remember a couple of years ago when I was thinking of having him on the program and trying to find ways to contact him. Wait, he doesn't even use Skype. I mean, wow, what a weird person. Yeah. But it makes more and more sense when you think about it. If you don't demand an open source alternative, and if you don't work to help create that infrastructure yourself, then you are going to be caught in that matrix. I think you're right. I think people are starting to wake up to this, but I think it's a question of the larger foot race that's going on, and it is a pretty disturbing foot race, because it's one that's happening against the singularity generally. And this is something that's only starting to break through to mainstream awareness, but of course people like Ray Kurzweil and others have been writing about this for decades.
Right.
And his prediction, 2029, is the point at which technology is going to be progressing so quickly that our ability to comprehend it will be left behind. And I don't know if that's true or if that's sci-fi fantasy, but I think that he makes a pretty compelling case when you actually see one of his presentations about the acceleration in technological progress. And where is this heading? This is heading to the point where ultimately what's going to be left behind, I'm not sure you'll be able to say it's a human. We are heading into a cyborg universe, and people just want to automatically scoff at that because, of course, so that's just ridiculous science fiction. But it is happening more and more, and I think with the advent of things like Google Glasses, I don't know, if people don't see what's happening when we start actually wearing these computers and then start implanting them into our bodies, if we don't start understanding what's happening here on a more fundamental level, then we really have lost. So I'm hoping that people will start to see this technology for what it is. But unfortunately, I know that the generational process of indoctrinating people into new technologies can be extremely effective, so that people now just take it for granted that there are CCTV cameras watching what you do on the street. Pretty soon they'll be taking it for granted that they also have microphones and are listening to your conversations and scanning them for keywords, et cetera, which already exists but is now just being gradually rolled out for the public's consumption.
Sure.
And in the future it's going to be these complete brain chips or whatever it is that they implant in your body that are going to be melding with your mind probably from the time you're born. But it'll just seem natural because there will be a generation that grows up not knowing anything different.
Well, yeah, it's the Gattaca scenario. And some people say, well, we've been cyborg since the advent of the car. You get into this exoskeleton and you use it to thrust your body through the world at a faster rate than it can. Of course, that's just the first step. It's just like, autonomous drones. Heat-seeking torpedoes were the first intelligent weapons, if you really want to look at it that way. And
hey, I wear glasses, so I'm not unfamiliar with the concept that
Sure.
technology has already been incorporated into our bodies to
Sure.
a large extent. But
Sure.
but I
No, and I think that technology is, of course, in and of itself pretty much inert. It's just how you use it, and I've seen some pretty pretty good new awareness programs. I mean, when we first got the internet, just here's smartphones, kids, take pictures of yourself. Well, we saw what happened with that and how much information that was being put out there. Eric Schmidt, Bilderberg attendee extraordinaire, he said that the kids today will have to change their names. They will be unemployable because of all of the data and all of the historical records of all of the bad stuff that they did, stuff that you and I probably did, that no one has the dirt on. But now, employers are looking at this, and so your whole life is being judged by not just your peers, but potential college, professors, whoever it may be. I mean, that could look at all of this data, and so I think that people are becoming aware of this and becoming more like you and most of us that listen to a lot of the things that are happening, and that is very selective with what you give the computers. I like computers, but I only put so much information onto the internet. Of course, I'm one of these people like yourself that wants to talk about these topics, and so I use the internet to reach as many people as possible that want to have this discussion and find it to be interesting and entertaining, quite frankly. And I think it is. And so it's a wonderful tool for that, but not so great at keeping personal pictures of yourself. It's not so great at not listening to you through microphones. And so I hope that people are going to become more cautious, and that might change. That in and of itself might change the whole perception of just trusting the machines and going into the Ray Kurzweil nightmare. Hopefully it hits humanity and we start treading more lightly, if you will.
Well, I certainly hope so, but this is, I mean, you raised so many good points, but exactly right. I mean, this is one of the things that always strikes me in the work that I'm doing is that here I am on YouTube and I have Twitter and other things like this that I rail against and I advocate people not to use, but there I am doing this there. So there's that question of, can you rail against it from the outside? Or do you have to go inside that system to shake people out of it? And
right.
I've chosen the latter, but there comes a point at which you have to think, well, I mean, at what point am I actually feeding into the system rather than detracting from it? And it's not something I'm unaware of, but it really is that question. How do you rail from the outside of the system? How do you rail against it?
I don't think you can. I don't think you can rail because you're a hypocrite. That's what happens when you make that distinction. You say, okay, well, I'm going to tell you that it's bad. I think that it's okay to use it. I think it's actually not bad at all to use it. It's how you use it. And that's what's important. Are you using it to give yourself or use it to put out personal information about yourself? Probably not a good idea. Or maybe your family, not a good idea. But if you responsibly use it and then through that system tell other people, look, you can't trust this. You cannot trust this machine. It's not going to be here tomorrow, maybe. It could be taken away. The government can subvert it. The government can tweet at you and change your tweets. If you're more cognizant of it, then you have a greater appreciation of the tool that it is, the awareness that goes with it. I mean, you can make that argument right down to computers. I mean, you look at the Congo. I mean, the PlayStation resource wars that are happening because of the mass production of electronics that you and I and every person listening to this podcast use. So in one breath, you say, "Well, this is horrible," but at the same time, using these tools, we can make more people aware and hopefully change that situation that's already happening. Once you become aware of these issues, then you have the power to change that.
I hear you, and I agree with what you're saying, but I also see the kind of spider web that can be constructed by this, and it's a very enticing one. So I still have my reservations about it, but at the same time, I know that, I mean, even the simplest, stupidest little things, like, for example, I always keep my webcam covered on my iMac, and people have noticed that in some of my videos, and I can't even tell you how many people have emailed me from behind the scenes to go, well, why do you cover your webcam? What's the big deal? And I can point them to all the stories of webcams being hacked into, etc., and at least get people starting to think along those lines. So, I mean, even the tiny things that people pick up on from that can really wake some people up and shake them out of their slumbers. So there is some value to this, but I'm also conflicted about ultimately whether I want to play ball with the system in order to change the system.
Well, yeah, I am as well, and I've given a lot of thought, probably more than I should, considering because you can just get caught in this feedback loop where you just you don't want to be part of something that you think is evil, and using Google and Twitter to a certain extent and other social networking platforms have documented scientific societal issues for people, but it comes right back down to, I think, ultimately that we can't create a system that's going to coddle those that aren't bright enough to understand things like freedom. That comes with great responsibility, and to have those kind of things in our lifetime, to have something like anarchy or like a true form of a free market, it's going to take a lot more informed, intelligent people to have that. I don't think that we could have it right now. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think that we can free ourselves from the system, but I think that we still have a lot of growing up to do.
I do agree with you on that. I think that there's absolutely a certain level of knowledge and understanding that has to be attained before we could even approach those types of ideas. And I would even be happy if the vast majority of the population that generally just goes along to get along, if we could just change that underlying ambient mix so that people kind of accepted the idea of freedom and that was just kind of the pervasive cultural norm, then we could maybe just switch over to that type of system. But it's a vast gulf indeed between where we are now and where we want to be. And generally, I'd say, well, this is a generational project, and we can just have hope for the future. But when we're racing up against the clock of a singularity, or at the very least of this encroaching technology that's becoming more and more hardwired into people's daily lives and eventually into people's bodies, and who knows in what ways that this technology will be able to control the people who are using it, I think that there is actually a kind of a race going on, a stopwatch that we're racing against. And I don't know how much time is on that stopwatch, but I'm not convinced that we have generations to work on this problem, given that the technology is advancing at such a rate. I mean, it's already at the point that the technology that exists now for would-be dictators is just absolutely light years ahead of what a Hitler or a Stalin or any other tyrant in history could have possibly dreamt of. Now those types of tools are readily available, and they're only getting more and more sophisticated. So I'm not sure we have a lot of time to be pondering these things, but at any rate, I'm trying to raise the awareness that I can so that people will at least start talking about this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because, I mean, it's the biggest discussion of our lives. I mean, never before have we been able to use the internet to reach so much information so easily, so quickly before. I mean, never before in human history that we know of. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't have other species before us that were wiped out, and you look at clocks from the Ming Dynasty and you have to wonder how many times we've been on this roller coaster ride, and when everything moves to a digital platform, society can get wiped away pretty easily. The Hoover Dam will still be here. They have a Stargate on top of it for the aliens that will come and maybe rebreed us. But I know exactly what you mean with this timeline and the countdown clock and that pressing aspect of it. And I have a few different hopes. One is that it's going to be so hard to mine the resources that it will no longer be able to be done to bring us all of these rare technologies and earths. So we only maybe have another 100 years of being able to harvest Mother Earth for iPhones. Maybe longer, I don't know, and maybe the technology will surpass that point to where we have technology that is so easy to make and I guess unimpactful to the environment that can happen. I mean, that's kind of the timeline. I think there's a crescendo there. And you've heard it with peak oil and other doomsday prophecies. No longer will we have energy, and it's the day the earth goes black. But some of those, I mean, seem pretty legitimate. It's just, when. Is it 1,000 years from now? Is it next week? That's really what matters. But when it comes to the technology, I just wonder how much more, because it's not just the technology itself, it's the energy that's required. Just look at Iraq. Here's an example. They were spending $20 billion monthly just for air conditioning. $20 million, I think it was. I have to look at it. It was some phenomenal amount of money and resources just to air condition it. So now they're going to have these quantum computers, and they already have some. I mean, just the generation of energy that's going to happen to store all of this data. I think that is going to be, the next big question. Can they maintain this?
It is a good point. It is a good question, and obviously not one that I have the ultimate answer to. But I really do think that technology has been suppressed so much over the past century by obviously the corporations and governments that profit from that technology being suppressed, that I think where we are as a society relying on fossil fuels for energy generation is just, I mean, this is a 19th century technology and we're in the 21st century. I can't imagine that there hasn't been progress made on these types of issues. And I think that, that there definitely has been suppressed technologies along these lines over the past century.
Absolutely.
But it's always a question of, there's always charlatans that come along in that mix that are trying to sell their latest, magic elixir tonic of free energy, etc. So I think there's been a lot of dilution of that pool, but I'm sure there is something out there, and I that's the part of the technological advancement that I think a lot of people don't get, is that when you look at, for example, the overpopulation fearmongers, the thing that they have been wrong about in every single generation for the past couple of centuries since Malthus was spreading his ideas is that the technology outstrips the ability of people to outgrow their food supply or whatever the case may be, so that what the amount of food that we're producing now is just unthinkable compared to what they were producing a couple of hundred years ago per capita. The rates have gone up so much that impending we're going to die off in a generation somehow never arrived, and it has somehow failed to arrive every single generation because the pie keeps growing and growing, even as we take a larger and larger slice of it. So I think that's something that we could look at as an analogy to the technology problem. I imagine I really do think that if there was a concerted effort to want to continue expanding our ability to produce these technologies, that we could find better and better ways to do that so that we never necessarily run into that brick wall. But it's a question of whether that brick wall is handy for the would-be ruling elite and, the self-styled, self-appointed elite. And I think that's exactly what's behind such things as the peak oil idea, is that this is ultimately, I mean, who's going to benefit the most from that? It's the oil companies. It's the people who are already in those positions of power. Because if they can convince you that, it's extremely rare, it's running out, and we need to do these incredible things to try to get more and more oil, the prices go up the roof, and anyone who's looking to exert control over the society at large can use that as a leverage tool. So I think a lot of this has been kind of conditioned into the population. Your point is valid. I mean, I think at some point there is some sort of brick wall. I mean, there's just a physical limit to how much is actually in the earth. But whether we're anywhere near that limit or running up against it anytime soon, I'm not so sure about.
Well, we're running up against it, I think, in popularity among the public, and they're being brainwashed into believing that they have to be neo-feudal serfs and some commie communitarian plantation to be able to exist and have a non-impactful carbon negative output, and it just goes on and on and on, and it's a big scam. I see it in building code all the time. If you put so many small parking spots in front of your building, then you get a tax exemption. And it's like, well, it has nothing to do with, cleaning the environment, and there's nobody parking in these spots, and they were going to allocate them to people that had handicapped accessible vans or the like. And so it was really, it's creating value. They create value out of scarcity, out of fear, and out of nothing. Absolutely nothing. And tax incentives to people that don't deserve them for doing things that are not altruistic in any way, form, or fashion. And everybody goes along with it. Why? because we engage in cognitive dissonance, and we just get used to having really, really stupid things thrust upon us that make no sense. And as long as that continues, I don't know how quickly we can get people back on board. But I think that there's a lot of people, and you hear it with the political correctness, even really out of touch people are saying, look, this is we're just kind of brain screwing ourselves into calamity here, just allowing us to be offended on every level, and that's what's happening with a lot of this green movement as well. It's fear based, and they're creating value and money out of things that don't exist, like carbon credits and derivatives upon carbon credits that are already failing, and they are failing the people that are investing in them. And by that I mean pensioners in the UK and people buying mutual funds in the U.S. These are bankrupt scams, but it works over and over again on people because it hits the psyche, and we're afraid to say, hey, that's not right, because we're afraid of being ridiculed. And that goes so far. I see it in everything, James. I see it all across the political spectrum. It's not just in politics. It's not just in denying, the coming of age through technology and what the implications may be. It's just in day-to-day life, people biting their tongues.
Unfortunately so, and I think you're right. It is a conditioning that people have been put under for so long that they don't even realize that they've been conditioned. And I think once you've internalized that, it is definitely an uphill battle to shake yourself out of that conditioning and to see the world as it is rather than as it's been constructed around us. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's always difficult to imagine that the world could be different than the way it is, or to imagine just how manipulated things have been to become what they are now, so that we now just accept, the way governments and corporations and all of this has evolved around us. Well, that's just natural. And we have to shake ourselves out of that. We have to find a different perspective and a different way of seeing it. And I don't know. I don't think there's a magic elixir for that. I don't think that there's some way that you can shake people out of the matrix. I think everyone has to come to it from their own understanding. And I know that I've been engaged in that process for a number of years now, and I'm not under any illusion that I've reached nirvana and that I understand everything. I'm still working towards it, but it is I think an extremely difficult and lengthy process. But hopefully there are more and more people who are engaged in that precisely because of the internet. And that's the double-edged side of this technology. You're right. I mean, fundamentally, the technology is inert. It's what we do with it. And there are more and more people who are coming to this information every day and at least engaging this conversation and at least thinking about these issues. And that's, I think, the most that I can ask of anyone out there right now, is that at the very least, just take this conversation on board and just start to ponder it and how it's affecting your own life, and talk to other people about it. I just want the societal conversation to revolve more around things like this, the kind of life and death issues for the future of humanity, rather than what was on Dancing with the Stars last night, or whatever that show's called. But again,
if you're starting the discussion, you're having these kind of talking points thrust at you by friends and family, you're doing a lot more than you think you are.
That's it. And again, I just want to stress that to people. I think that just starting the conversation is it's not going to be the end point, but it's going to be the beginning point for sure. And we're not going to get anywhere unless we start doing that. And not just online, not just arguing with people in comment section on YouTube or what have you. I mean, it has to be something that we take into the physical world and start talking to real people about, and finding some sort of way to negotiate what's happening to us. But on that note, I'm afraid I'm going to have to get running along to another interview.
Thanks for the time. And I was going to tell everybody they need to check out 9/11: A Conspiracy Theory. If you have 5 minutes, it's very powerful. It's woken up at least two of my friends, James. And every September 11th, I post it. And I always get just tons of response from people in a positive light that say, hey, this is something I can give to my family. It's funny. It's very palatable. The compliments are gushing. So I want to thank you for the time and the very fascinating discussion. I know that we started with NSA spying, and we ended up with the transhumanist society. And believe you me, folks, I'm not trying to drag you into it via Twitter. You should go in willingly, but you should gauge it. Look at the Leviathan before you decide. Don't look into its eyes, and make an informed and conscious decision. James, thanks so much. Tell everybody about your website, your podcast, where they can find you real quickly, and thank you for your time.
No problem. Well, people who are interested can find me at corbettreport.com. That's CORBETT report.com. And that's the one-stop shop where you can find all the links to all the other websites and things that I'm associated with. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And I think we'll have to do this again more quickly than in the next 2 years.
Absolutely, James. All right. That was James Corbett of thecorbettreport.com. Check out his website and, of course, his podcast, The Boiling Fraud Post as well. And we'll be back Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time for another live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Until then, take care.
Almost too delicious to believe, my friend.
Durka Durka, Muhammad Jihad, Haka Sherpa Sherpa, Bacala. Oh, Durka Durka Durka.